I'm Danny, and this is the Scream Princess podcast. Hello there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Scream Princess podcast. And I'm here today with Ray Turner, aka, I'm going to have to look at this, Jack-O-Lantern Stories. And that is on Instagram and on TikTok. How are you doing today?
I'm doing absolutely great and excited to be chatting with you.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on. And this has been like a literal short notice one. So I think I discovered Ray yesterday. And I don't know how you popped up into my feed. And I think it was possibly a hotel you'd visited in York that I might have followed. And then I kind of clicked on you and I was like, wow, this guy is so cool. And I looked at your content and I was like, I really want to get him on the show. Sent a
Oh,
message. And then it's literally the following day I've got you here. So.
yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I think it might be. So I recently, maybe a month or two ago now, visited the Hocus Pocus Hotel in York,
That was the
which,
one.
which is a fabulously spooky location. And I'm just this week taking over the social medias for them as the new social media manager. So we did like a linked post to sort of announce that. And I think that might be where you might have seen it.
Yeah, I think that's where I saw it. So I'm just going to read out your description here.
Yeah.
So, uncovering hidden ghost stories from Britain's haunted graveyards. So anyone who knows me knows that I'm a big hiker. And I always somehow end up in a graveyard. Like, not on purpose, but one of my friends was like, well, of course you're in another graveyard. And we now have this thing where every time I'm in one, I just send him a selfie in a graveyard. I'm like, I found another graveyard. And he's like, it's like you're just drawn to them. But how did this come about? I mean, obviously, I want to kind of start at the beginning where you kind of found your love of like the paranormal and kind of get onto what it is you do now. But
Yeah.
yeah, let's start at the beginning then. Let's say, where did you first discover you love the paranormal?
So the spark probably started in a house I grew up in as a child. I had quite a lot of paranormal experiences in it, and keep in mind we moved out of here when I was seven. And it was years later that my older family members, like mum, older sister, etc., began to say experiences that they'd had as well. So a few things I do recall from it. In my bedroom's at the end of this very long corridor is always icy cold. Sometimes at night I'd hear my name being whispered in an unsettling sort of voice. Other times I hear like a hissing noise. And when I'd ask my dad to come in and see what it would just suddenly cease. There was a day where there was hundreds of blue bottle flies all over my bedroom window. The next day they are completely gone, and my entire family seen that. Um, and occasions where I had a little shelf with sort of teddy bears on, and one night as I'm drifting off to sleep as a kid, I was watching them fall off one by one.
Yeah.
Now, this is just a small handful of absolutely bizarre experiences that we had in the house. And it was years later, as I say, speaking to my mum, she actually seen a full apparition in the house twice. And
Wow.
she's the last sort of person to, say that sort of thing. Both times as well, this sort of spectre or whatever it was covering its face. And she said, now a lot of ghosts that I hear about over the years are, you know, like me or you, they're all there, like a person. She said this wasn't. She said it was slightly hazy about it, and she could see the staircase slightly through it, which was interesting. It's like it hadn't fully formulated itself.
That's how I kind of envision ghosts, though. I envision them being a little bit see-through. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't see any, but I mean, if I did, I feel like they'd be a little bit see-through. I don't know
yeah.
why.
Yeah, that because that's I think typically how they always have been portrayed,
Hmm.
and that's how she said she's seen it. So you do hear of them when they're not fully able to appear for whatever reason. You know, some people just see phantom legs and arm, etc. And this is what she's seen years later. So when we got talking about it all, I think that had initially sparked my interest, thinking, well, something's going on. I definitely had these experiences as a kid, and there is numerous ones, and they kind of got solidified when my family began to say that they did as well.
Yeah.
So naturally, my mum and dad were quite good storytellers about classic places in Liverpool where they'd grown up, and so I love that city now for this very reason. And it sparked an interest and a fascination in it ever since. So in terms of how the social side of things got going, um, it was during COVID actually. I wasn't a funeral director at that point. I was working in law in a solicitor's, and we got sent from home. And I began, just scrolling through, trying to find a profile where it was filled with ghost stories that I could read. but there
Yeah.
wasn't any really like that. So I thought, well, do you know what? I'm going to make one. And it all started there.
It's great. I love the t-shirt, by the way. So my notebook, hang
It's my
on.
iconic childhood
This is my
goosebumps.
notebook. This is where I've written
Oh,
my
I
notes.
love it. Fabulous.
Do you know that shop? Like, I think it was a typo. They used to have really cool notebooks. I've got a Baywatch one as well. That's like the other flip side. But yeah, I'm loving Goosebumps. I haven't seen the new
Oh,
film
yeah.
yet.
It's so good.
So you grew up in Liverpool,
In Southport, it was.
Southport.
It's close to Liverpool, and
Right,
then
okay.
everyone moved down there for university. So I kind of built up like a good, solid knowledge of haunted Liverpool as well.
Mhm. I was trying to work out where you were from because was at first I was looking just at where you'd been rather than actually clicking on things, and there was a lot around York and around Yorkshire, so I was like, is he from Yorkshire? And then I clicked on something and I was like, that's not a Yorkshire accent.
No, it's quite distinct, isn't it?
Mm.
Yeah, it's a Scouse accent. Yeah, so I was born there. This haunted house experience was in Southport, which is really close to Liverpool. And then I moved back to the city for university, as I say. So I've got quite good links with it still, and that's where I built up a lot of my haunted knowledge, really, is of that city.
So it wasn't something that's I mean, obviously you've been interested in the paranormal all of your life, but it wasn't something you really delved into until kind of much later.
Absolutely. I'd always watched it. I'd always been fascinated in documentaries of it and reading stories of it. I've always collected books on it. It's just been something that always appealed to me. And it wasn't until the TikTok in particular really
Mm.
is when that really started to take off. More people were then contacting me with their ghost stories or inviting me to their haunted hotels or things like that. And I took a slightly different approach on there, as you might have seen, if
Mm.
that I'm not a paranormal investigator as many people are
Yeah.
on there because that's what they enjoy doing, you know.
Yeah.
It's more a case of I'll visit and tell the stories from the location. And more
Yeah.
often than not, I've had absolutely strange things happen while I'm doing it.
Well, I find with the paranormal investigators, like I know it kind of most haunted, I think, is what kind of really put that on the map. But I feel like there's so many people trying to do that, and a lot
Yeah,
of them are wandering around finding nothing, and that's pretty much their show. Like you're going to struggle for the most part to, find yourself a good ghost to make that a show worth watching. So I think what you're doing is really cool because it's the myths and it's the legends and it's the stories. So whether you find anything or not, or experience anything or not, you're kind of building that suspense for people. You're building that story for them, and then if they go there, they'll already have that kind of fear pent up inside. So
absolutely.
they're more likely to think they're going to see something.
Yeah, you're spot on. It's all about bringing the folklore and the ghost stories to the modern day.
Mm.
Sometimes ones that I've came across are almost lost to history. Of course, I tell the really well-known ones from your good spots in York and where I've
Yeah.
been going quite recently in Edinburgh and what have you. But there's nothing better than uncovering a good old ghost story that you just about have found somewhere in an old book and then
Yeah.
retelling it to people.
I love that. In fact, looking through your page, I spotted something on Bella and the Witch Elm, which is something I hadn't really heard about. But I've got a director friend called Tom Lee Rutter, and he was on kind of one of my previous podcasts, actually. I think he was like maybe my second or third one. And he actually did a film. He's from that area. It's like, is it the Black Country, somewhere down there?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
he's
yeah.
actually done a film called Bella and the Witch. I haven't seen it, so I've worked with him on other various projects. But I was like, oh, so that is the story.
That's a really unsettling one. That I first actually encountered that one on YouTube, and it's
Yeah.
funny, inspiration for visiting places, and it could be
Mm.
anywhere. But as soon as I pick up like a bit of a legend like that, I say to my partner Craig, I said, we've got to go, we've got to go shoot it, film it, and get there.
Do you make him do all the photography stuff?
Quite
Because
often,
that's what
yes.
I do to mine. I'm like, can you take a picture of me here? Can you film me doing this? And he's like,
He would
yes.
terrible for it. He's so patient though, but in terms of like the shooting the videos where I'm not in it, I'll do all of
Yeah.
them bits, and then bits that I'm in it where I want to, narrate or what have you.
Yeah.
He does those for me as well. So we work as a really good team.
Yeah, that's great. So you went from law to your
Yes.
job as a funeral director. I mean, I guess like how were you one of those people that were like, you're doing law, you're doing well, but you don't really like what you do? And then you're like, what else is there out there?
Absolutely. I've always been a people person. I'm quite a social person. I enjoy, social interactions. And my degree that I studied was in criminal justice. So I was originally working with people coming out of prison.
Mm.
That was like rehabilitating them back into society or with drug and alcohol addiction. I covered sort of all of those factors. Um, and then I went into law because it was better paying and more reliable, really. But it was one of those jobs where you could potentially get caught in the rat race of it, And then I'd eventually moved on to this other job where I was helping prisoners specifically get back into employment. So I
Mm.
was coaching them as soon as they came out and factoring a whole host of factors in terms of getting them back on the feet and not reoffending, which is a complex matter in itself. But I'd always been fascinated with funeral care, and I didn't really know anything about it. And I think that was part of the allure, really,
Mm.
is what happens when you die? What happens if you don't have money? What happens to the body? And how does the funeral shape? It always interested me. And in some ways, a morbid curiosity, and in other ways, just a fascinating fascination with the area.
Mm.
So I'd seen it come about, and they were hiring funeral directors straight into the position, had with certain factors that you had to have had previously, a degree in management experience, what have you. And I went for it. And I always remember on the day of the interview, I expected it to be, like stern old men and things like that, and it wasn't like that at all.
Mm.
And to the room that had the interview in, you had to pass like all the coffins because they're built in house, and straight away and getting talking in the interview, I thought, I love this. I want to do it. So I gave me all to the interview, and then lo and behold, they gave it to me. And
Amazing.
today, unless like my creativity that I do in my spare time really took off, I
Yeah.
will be a director forever. I love it.
Wow. I've always fancied the makeup, doing the makeup. I probably wouldn't. I've never actually seen a dead person and I don't know if I'd like it, but I feel like I'm not a people person. So I'd be like, well, they wouldn't talk to me. So that would be a plus point.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I don't know. I think it would, I think, was it My Girl? And one of the characters, their mum or dad was a funeral director, and there was like somebody doing the makeup. And I was like, "Oh, that would be a cool job. But I obviously never went into it.
It is cool to do. And like, as I say, being people persons, because being the funeral director, I do everything from looking after the dead in terms of, yes, hair, makeup. I'll sometimes help with dressing and what have you. But there is a team that I have that do all of
Mm.
that. So my main job, aside from doing those parts, is guiding the families when they've just lost someone. Um, so I'll do the arrangements, or if I'm not available, one of the ladies in the funeral home will do it for me, and then I'll lead the day of the service itself as well. So the hearses, the limousines, how the cremation or the burial will go, I'll structure that day and then lead it. So heavily, you're dealing with people who are in, not always, grief comes in many, many forms, but you're quite often dealing with people at the worst time in their life. And it's having those social skills, the empathy and the understanding to be able to look after them properly,
Mhm.
but make sure that funeral goes without a hitch as well. So it's the most stressful job I've ever done, but the most rewarding.
So whilst you've been in the funeral home, have you ever had any spooky experiences?
I personally haven't, I must say. That being said, I work for like a popular sort of chain of funeral homes, if you will, that
Mm.
are well known. We have a branch in Preston, a city that's not too far away, and that funeral home is notoriously haunted. So it's got a few creepy things in there. It's one of our only ones that's kept to the original design of how the funeral homes would look. So you've got like a big grandfather clock as you go in, a stained glass window, chapels of rest that go along a bottom floor and an upper floor as well. Whereas the ones that I look after have been quite modernized, so they feel a bit more cozy. But I prefer the traditional ones, but that's just
Yeah.
me.
Do you feel
And
like then the hauntings are like not necessarily, they might be like historical hauntings just because the buildings are so old and that, rather than it being stuff that's like there now?
yeah, that's probably what I would associate with it. I often find that when you're looking after a person who's passed away, that's just sort of the vessel that's carried the person through the life. And if hauntings are indeed real and people do believe them to be, it would be whatever has left when you pass away. So
Mm.
yeah, you're right. I think in those buildings, that particular one, of why that has something in and the others don't, is because it's got a long history of previous places that building's been prior to a funeral home. In particular, um, staff will see, and this is all different staff have seen it over the years, despite telling each other because they don't want to scare new people, is on the top floor where the chapels of rest are, they see a man's pair of legs going through the balcony. So it's like wooden, balcony slots. And they see his black pants and the old-fashioned leather shoes with the white part on the front, that quite well-to-do men would have worn. And those legs go across the landing. And of course, as soon as they leave their front desk expecting to see somebody, the legs vanish. And that's like one of many things that happen in there. You never see it above the waist, but always these phantom legs.
That usually when there's been another floor or something, they say, don't they? Or there's been a wall taken out or something, and the
Possibly,
spirit's still
yeah.
doing whatever they're doing, and like there would be a wall there originally, or
It's like it's replaying how it was when it was alive.
yeah. Have you seen the film? So this is a film that really freaks me out, The Autopsy of Jane Doe.
Yeah, a half a while ago, yeah.
So I really want to believe in ghosts. I love the idea of it. And like you, I love paranormal stories and I love going to haunted places or supposedly haunted places. And I love learning, about them, like we said, the myths and the legends and everything. But I'm kind of yet to see anything or anything to happen to me that kind of convinces me, apart from one lamp once turning on in a hotel room. That was literally all that's happened.
Yeah.
But I do find films about the supernatural quite freaky, and that one really got me.
It's good. My favorite genre of horror films, because I'm a big horror film fan as well, is the paranormal type ones. Whilst I do love my 80s campy slashers, and I always will, the paranormal ones have always been the most appealing to me because in some ways they can be the most realistic,
Mm.
true to real life tales. And I'm at the minute absolutely loving anything by A24 as well, particularly their paranormal ones.
Oh, I don't know if I've seen any.
You might well have, so they've done like Hereditary, Midsummer.
Okay, yes, no, I have. I think I haven't seen Midsummer. I've seen Hereditary.
They're quite, all of their movies I feel like are quite psychologically scary. They're not like just jump scares.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a bit more that keeps you unsettled.
So I like a jump scare. I recently just watched The Conjuring last week, and I've seen it before, and I still must have jumped about 10 times, but literally sound comes out and I'm like in the air. I
Yeah,
think
that
I'm probably more entertaining to watch whilst I'm watching a film.
I could gladly fall asleep to them. I really could.
Could you? Oh, I really like them. I like a jump. Like, because I get really like invested, and then it's the music, isn't it? It's the score that gets you.
Yeah, totally. And I actually seen one that surprised me last night in the cinema. It came off a Valentine's Day called Heart Eyes.
I went to
And
see that on
yeah,
Valentine's
it was
Day,
really,
actually.
it was so funny. Yeah, and it made you laugh as well. And that was like one kind of off the cuff that we went to go and see.
Yeah.
But I'm up in the cinema. It's poor Craig, he always gets dragged along to all the horror films.
Well, I was meant to go with a friend, and then he couldn't make it, and he was like, "I'll send you the tickets." And my boyfriend was working, but he was finishing like 7, and I think the film was at 8, and I was like, Do you want to come?" And I didn't think he'd really want to because he'd work the next day, but he was like, "Okay, we'll do it." Um, but I feel like it was kind of a throwback to the 90s slashers. It had that kind of silliness to it. He didn't
Yeah.
really like it though. He took one for the team there watching it, but I loved it. I thought it was fun.
Yeah. It's totally Scream vibes, and I love it.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And Scream's one of my favorite horror films. I think that's a film that actually got me into horror. That was my catalyst when I was a teenager.
The original, the first one.
Yeah, the original way back when I was in Canada in my cousin's basement and we all watched it together, and that was it. It was like Scream and then The Craft and Urban Legend and I Know What You Did Last Summer. That whole era is my like favorite.
Totally. I always remember me because my mum and dad are big horror film fans as well, and we'd sometimes try and sneak a little peek at the VHSs that they had. And as a kid, and she'd be like, "No, you're not watching them." And then eventually, I think the first one that me and my sisters were allowed, because I'm the youngest of three, that we were allowed to watch was Leprechaun.
I
Which she
haven't
like,
seen that.
like yeah, it's quite campy horror, you know. And then I started falling in love with the 80s ones because my mum and dad did like Fright Nights and all of that. I love
Oh,
them.
that's a good one.
Oh, so good, The Vampire Next Door.
Yeah, that is so good. So from obviously lockdown, then you started doing the Instagram and the TikTok. I haven't really worked out TikTok yet. I can't quite get to grasp with TikTok. But so you just basically were watching other people's stuff, finding out like places, and you're like, so is it when you wait till weekends and then each time you like find a new place to investigate or explore?
Yeah, sometimes it can happen quite off the cuff, and there when we're being a bit spontaneous, that's got some of the biggest performing videos that I've ever done. But it's always nice to have something on the radar as well.
Mm,
Pardon me. So like, various places that have reached out to me that will set up and we'll go down and explore. Like a recent good one that I did that was a bit of a drag was the Hellfire Caves up in Wickham, High Wycombe. Like they had a good legend that I'd heard about for years, and you briefly mentioned before about, Most Haunted, and
mhm,
regardless of what people's opinions are on that, that's one of the shows that made me fall in love with the whole, paranormal side of things as well, aside my own experiences. And I always remember that episode where they all went down to the Hellfire Caves. So I originally just went down there, I set it up, was just normal paying person who attended and managed to catch it on a rainy, dull day when it was quite quiet and filmed all inside, and the video performs really, really well. So, um, the social media owner like reached out to me and said, "Well, we'll set something up with you again," and that's how it happens. It's networking, but
mhm.
it always, you feel like when you think of like networking and speaking to people, like it's like a bit of a labor. But my day job keeps me so incredibly busy that that couldn't be the case if it was a labor.
Yeah.
It's a hobby that I absolutely love, and it's gaining a bit of traction, and that
Mm.
makes it a lot more fun because you don't know where you're going to end up.
Yeah. So do you like obviously research your story? So when you're going to be doing a reel or whatever, you know kind of the things you want to talk about and then you go and get the footage, or do you just literally film everything and then kind of come home and pull it together?
There's actually a bit of both there, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So generally, I'll go to a place with a purpose. So I've already heard legends, stories, etc. Then I'll get there, and I'll always be chatting away then to staff who work there. So whether that's a historic hall, and it's, volunteers that work there, they've generally got some really good things to tell you. Or pubs are fantastically known to be haunted.
Yeah.
So I'll speak to the bar staff there. And quite often, what has really surprised me throughout doing this is the amount of people that have had ghostly experiences or are quite happy to tell you it. Because before you do it, if it's just a conversation that will generally spring on someone,
Yeah.
you don't know what reaction you're going to get. But when I tell them a little bit about what I do, the amount of stories that I've sort of taken in that's through word of mouth and not to other people won't know them is
Right.
phenomenal. And they're the best ones because they're first-hand accounts.
Yeah. Yeah, they are. I've been to York. I haven't been to the hotel. I haven't been to the Hocus Pocus hotel, which is mad because Hocus Pocus is one of my favorite movies. So I'd have thought I'd have heard of that like long before it popped up. But I have been to the Golden Fleece, which is
Yeah.
said to have five ghosts. I think
Yeah,
is it
indeed.
five? So I popped in there last time I was in York for a couple of drinks. But York is like one of those places that like it's such a beautiful city. Like, so old, the shambles. If anyone's watching this or listening to this and they haven't visited York, 'cause obviously we go out all over the world, it is just like this real kind of it's a kind of medieval town, isn't it? There's a wall that you can walk right the way around. It's just a really old town. Um,
It's
but
got that old worldly vibe, hasn't it? And it's got so much history there that the ghost stories kind of complement it in a way. There's something to be found in most of the streets there, the pubs,
mhm.
hotels. And what I quite like about it as well is they've embraced that ghostly feel to the city,
Yeah.
because in some places, if it's not widely, appreciated, it can be lost a little bit. But
Mm.
you've got ghost tours on the go that are keeping the stories alive. It's just, yeah, it's a fascinating place. And as you say, the Golden Fleece has become infamous for its legends of ghosts now. And interesting video that I put out of that. I've done about three on the Fleece now, actually. And every single one has done so well in terms of the comments on there of people's personal experiences. And it just makes you think for that amount of people to have something when they're just nipping in for a drink,
Mm.
something going on. And particularly the ladies' loos, funny enough.
So I didn't get haunted in the loos there.
Good. You're probably glad you never. It's the
What
one.
is it about toilets? I lived in London for a long time, and my local pub was meant to have a haunted toilet. It was famous for having a haunted toilet, but I also never got haunted in that toilet, which
Did
is
you
fine,
not?
but fine by me. It was the Bow Bells in East
Ah,
London.
see. I've got to do a bit more of London, to be honest with you. Pluckley in Kent is the furthest south I've been so far,
I've been to
naturally because that's
Buckley.
got such a good reputation. But as I say, in terms of like creating the video, it's only been a couple of years, I'd say. So there's
Right.
still so much more to explore, particularly
Yeah,
down.
so I guess you're north. Is a little you're kind of north. So
Yeah,
yeah,
between
I guess the north,
where I am.
yeah, the north is kind of easier, isn't it? But yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, London's good. And I'd heard of the Hellfire Caves before because I've got the map. Is it
yeah.
I can't remember the make of the map now, but there was a map with all the like paranormal places on it. I think it's like supernatural and hauntings or something. And the
Oh,
Hellfire Caves is on that. But I think for me, my experience London. I've done like a couple of ghost tours in London, which have been great, and I've done the Jack the Ripper tours, which are incredible.
you about that?
Um,
Is it good?
but I read a book actually called The Five, and it's written by a historian, and she's a very feminist historian. But she was like, well, obviously, Jack the Ripper's been made into this kind of hero, really, because it's all the stories about Jack the Ripper, but actually, obviously, he's a bad guy. And the women, she wanted to tell the stories of the women that he'd killed. So she wrote a book about the canonical five, which is the five that they know he killed. And then I said to my friend, just as a random idea for a hike, because we used to just do random like London hikes after work when he'd finished work. I was like, well, on Saturday, do you fancy doing a tour of the graveyards of all of the Jack the Ripper victims? And my friend, who is not into horror or hauntings or anything, but he just wasn't surprised at all by me. He was like, yeah, sure. So I found a little route walking graveyard to graveyard, and I think there's only two of them that still have the graves there, and the others have got plaques and things. But that was kind of one of our walks. So I like the idea of like haunted hikes.
That's amazing. I would love to see the Jack the Ripper sites. And as
Yeah,
you say, yeah, it's him who's infamously remembered, isn't it? And I
yeah,
was something recently on, a bit of a documentary on it, and it gave an insight into the women of it and who they were, how they ended up the way they did. And it's we only remember them as being, women who sold themselves for money at the
yeah.
time. But
And I
really,
don't think they all did. Like it was only kind of two of them that kind of they were known to do that, but the others were just kind of women down on their luck who'd like lost a husband, and in those days you didn't get money, so it was like and you weren't allowed to have a job, and what else
yeah,
could they do? So yeah, so
yeah,
she basically wrote the book trying to like tell their story rather than making it about him because he's kind of gone down in like history.
yeah. It's the
But
mystery, I think, as well, isn't it? The fact that it never like truly, even though they think in recent times that they have
yeah,
proof that it was that Polish chap, but
yeah,
even still an era of mystery around it that I think will just always grab people in.
yeah, that they think it's the Polish barber. But if you haven't done one of the tours in London, they're incredible. They're like really informative. And there's a little museum as well, which it's really small, but it's kind of cute. And there's one where the museum runs a tour, so you can kind of do both on the same day.
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah, it certainly will be one we go and do because I'm dying to do the Tower of London as well. No pun intended.
I'd also recommend Richard Evans. He does a really good ghost tour. I think he does a couple, but I'd is it no Jones, Richard Jones, not Evans. I'm making people up. Richard Jones does a really good ghost tour, so I'd recommend them if you go to London as well.
That's something that I've said as well. If I'd consider doing on the weekends as a bit of a extra job as ghost tours, I'd quite like to do that.
Yeah, you should. They do really well. There's some incredible ones. I've done one in York. I've done one in Edinburgh and
Yeah.
then London and Norwich. That's the only four places that I've done ghost tours.
Did you do the streets of Edinburgh with you, or did you go into the vaults under the city?
I went into the vaults
Yeah, they're good then.
and then the graveyards.
Yeah, they're the best bits. The Greyfriars Kirkyard, it's obviously got the
Yeah.
infamous Geist in there of the Black Mausoleum.
Yeah. I was living like an hour from Edinburgh for a while. So we used to like pop on the train to Edinburgh like quite often just for the day and
It's
have
one of the
a good old
reasons
wander around.
the UK, isn't it? If for people who love this sort of thing, and whether that's paranormal or you just love things that are spooky and a little bit
Yeah.
gothic, that's the story. The city like York has got those stories to it and has that
Yeah.
feel as well.
I think a lot of cities do, and unless you kind of really delve into them, you know, you don't find out.
That's it. Well, in terms of like speaking about Liverpool before, it's got books now that go. Oh God, he must be on about 35 or whatever. That I've been collecting them all by a chap called Tom Slemon who writes Haunted Liverpool. So their
Right.
books get done really, really well, and they kind of they tell that story in the same way that my mum and dad did or my nan did when I was growing up. So it feels relevant to me. I
Mm.
know the streets they're talking about or the way they're saying things. So they feel very vivid in my mind when I'm reading them. But he's covered a whole host of things of, anything that falls under the supernatural umbrella in the city, really. So from, ghosts to witches to vampire legends to unexplained time slips. Liverpool's famous for one of them at the top of Bold Street, where there's still standing a bombed out church. Now
Wow.
they do like events in it and what have you.
Mm.
It's got no windows, no roof, and you can sometimes on a Sunday still go into it. And that's had countless times over the years where people have been walking down the street and the church is suddenly complete again, and there's people of a completely different time frame around there.
That's amazing. So I always think when I go to, any old buildings, I'd love to just, like put your hands on the stone or something and just kind of be transported back and not necessarily to live as part of that time, but just to be able to be a fly on the wall,
Yeah.
to see the people that lived there, what they were wearing, what they were eating, like, what they were talking about, their conversations. It'd be fascinating.
That's one of the interesting things, isn't it, though, about your ghost stories when you're telling of people from a different period, if they are
Mm.
still able to see what's going on today, their world would have been so different.
Yeah, like they wouldn't understand us. Well, we said that like we couldn't go back and then literally live amongst them because I'd be burnt for witchcraft straight away. Like we're wearing funny clothes, we've got piercings, we've got tattoos. That would have been like, I don't know, marks of the devils or whatever. Like we wouldn't have been able to integrate, but it would be great just to see.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Have you ever done much over Pendle Hill way or experienced much of over
I
there?
have, but we
Well,
are almost out of time for part one. So I'm going to give you a little break and we can come back and talk about Pendulum part two.
let's do that.
Welcome back to the Screen Princess podcast. In the break, actually, I Googled Southport, so I now know where you are on the map. I was like, couldn't quite work out. So you're kind of in between Liverpool and Blackpool.
Yeah, Southport is. That's where I work. Yeah. So, and
Right.
between, yeah, you can see Blackpool across the water. Liverpool's literally just down there. I live in a little village close to like sort of the Manchester way, really.
Right.
Like pretty nice and rural over here, and
Right.
a few good ghost stories around here as well. And it fits that sort of vibe. Little stone cottages, all of this.
I love that. I live in the northeast now, and kind of up in like I'm a bit below Northumberland, but up in Northumberland you've got all of those kind of stone houses and lots of castles and things up here. So lots of like potential spooky places. In fact, have you ever been to Chillingham Castle?
That's one that's on my list for this year, actually. I've heard so many good things, and I was looking the other week about a little bit of a road trip I could make over the weekend.
Hmm.
Um, I could be there in about 2 hours,
Yeah.
and saying it's closed at this time of year. So I'm
Yeah.
guessing like historic houses, they close down for the winter period, don't they?
Yeah.
It's really. But absolutely I will because I've heard some belters.
Yeah, I went there not too long ago. So obviously before it closed. It must have been, I don't even know, was it towards it must have been towards the end of last year. Maybe it was October actually. You know how like the months have gone very, very quickly. It might have been October. And there's like literally hardly anybody about. It was really, really quiet. And the first time we actually went to have a look at it, we were just driving, we'd been on a hike somewhere else. We couldn't find it. And I was like, is this a castle that you can only find, like, I don't know, in the light of a full moon or something? And we literally driving around for ages and couldn't find it. But this time we actually aimed to go there and we got there in the end. And it was incredible. It was a really cool place. It's got a museum inside, which is really cool. And then you've got this kind of Tudor Great Hall, which is a coffee shop. And one of the rooms is meant to be really, really haunted. I did actually set up a camera and they said, just sit in there for a while quietly and you might hear like children and stuff. And we set up a camera, but I didn't hear anything. So maybe you'll have more luck than I did.
Oh, I'll certainly try. Speaking of like children's voices like that, um, referring back to in Liverpool, they've got a bit like a Georgian quarter. It's really old-fashioned, like old cobbled streets and sodium lamps. So it's got that orange glow everywhere. It's been kept true to the period. One of my first jobs after I graduated was on that road. It was like a rehab by day, but it's shared like the building because it was a big building, like even though it was terrace with like a bridal shop. So it was quite grand inside. It was beautiful actually.
Right.
And the basements though have been like kept left to the Victorian times. They didn't really get bothered with. The odd things were stored down there and what have you. And anyway, I remember getting told once, oh, like the old cellars down there apparently meant to be haunted by children. And I was like, oh, right, okay. There's tons of ghost stories around there. So I loved it though, don't get me wrong. And I always remember on a Thursday, I was working the late shift that night, So before I go and get the train back home, I didn't drive back then. I just left finished uni. I'd have to lock up all the building at night, so the whole three floors of it, the bridal shop had gone by then, and this was about 9 o'clock. So part of it, I noticed that the cellar's going down. The light was flicked on down the bottom, and I knew that nobody had been down there the whole day. They don't need to. So when I opened the top floor, the bottom floor, sorry, to go into these cellars, flick the light off, and I distinctly heard little children's shoes running around in the basement and like a giggly type noise. But it was that convincing. I thought there was still people in there.
Mm.
So I said, "Oh, excuse me, I'm locking up now." It's dead silence, completely stopped. So then I was still at this point thinking it was people. Um, so I had to bloody go down these steps, didn't I, on my own in this building? Lo and behold, you go down there, it's a pretty open space. There's only like a Victorian old boiler down there and some other bits that the rehab had placed, and there was nobody there. So it's safe to say the lights bloody got flicked straight off and off I popped out into the street. And then I made after that on them Thursdays, my friends stay with me because I'm not doing that again because I heard that. I don't want to be bloody attacked by them.
So I feel like, can ghosts hurt you though? I mean, they're not alive anymore. They're an energy.
But I've certainly had people who report experiences where they have been.
Yeah.
Um, the fleece that you were talking about before, people often get their hair pulled quite badly in there, get the drinks thrown off the table. Quite poltergeisty activity. So it depends when you say a ghost, what
Mm.
type you mean, really, because they seem to have different energies about them. And this is one thing I've been thinking of recently, is a ghost, a dead person, or is it something completely different that's already here with us, like a bit of an elemental type thing that
Yeah.
they've had throughout history? I mean, it could be, sometimes they report them looking like me and you, don't they? But are these other things that are, creating hauntings or moving things? Can you imagine if, you've lived your whole life, you've gone about your interests doing what you're doing, you
Mhm.
start to pass away in your house, and you're trapped there forever just moving cups, you
I
know?
would so haunt people, and I'd have
Yeah,
a great time doing it.
I would be the worst ghost ever because I'm mischievous anyway. I'm always winding up my other half.
Yeah.
But I also get bored easily. So if I, as I say, if I died in this house now through sudden death, and I couldn't be haunting this every day forever. I'd go
No, I'd
mad.
want to go on adventures. I wouldn't want to be trapped. But I
I know.
feel like, if you're not trapped in life, you should not be trapped when you're dead. You should be able to kind of go off and then come back when you want to. Like it could be your base, but you
Yeah,
can,
how
and
it's
I feel
still.
like you should be able to like transport yourself to anywhere as well, like all the places that you didn't get to go in life, maybe that you wanted to visit. Maybe you could like go and do
Yeah,
that.
totally. That should be the restrictions of no longer being in a living body, shouldn't it? But
Yeah.
one thing that always like makes me think like, why does that one house or that one hotel keep getting strange things happening? Like, is the ghost just in there all day? Like, how haven't they gone insane if they've still got the brain that they had when they were alive? You
I mean,
know?
I definitely feel like there's too many stories and too many things have happened to people and too many experiences for there not to be anything. But like I said, I'm still waiting for something to kind of prove to me.
Isn't it? To
Like
have
I
that.
have presented a couple of ghost hunts in the past in various places, and I didn't see anything that I couldn't explain. Like I want to try and kind of debunk until something is like, wow, I can't, like I've seen, people moving things and like they try and distract you
Yeah, yeah,
so that you
yeah.
don't see it, but I'm looking out for it and I'm like, okay, well, they're definitely moving the table and they're definitely doing
Get
this, you know.
get loads of that. And sometimes, something that I find it as well, I think people subconsciously are moving like, planchettes and Ouija boards and
Mhm.
what. Yeah. And it's not always intentional, but I think because they're that involved in the moment, they're expecting answers. They kind of know what they wanted to say
Yeah.
and feel their fingers pulling towards it, but then at the end they're terrified. So I'm thinking it could subconsciously be doing it as well, because that's been a thing that's, been proven throughout the years of when people are then blindfolded that the Ouija board can no longer spell anything. Now
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
not saying it's not real, because certainly I think messages do come across, and I had one quite terrifying encounter in here with one once when I thought it was hocus pocus. But I think a lot of it is people moving it as well.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is. So, in the kind of adventures you've had and the kind of places you've gone, what are the kind of places you've said there's definitely an energy, there's definitely something, or you've seen something, experienced something? Like, where are the spookiest places you've been to?
So I've got a few really. So I'll start off with the most recent one. This is only going back a couple of weeks now. The Adelphi Hotel in Liverpool is notoriously haunted. It always has been. People have a plethora of ghost sightings have happened in there, and completely different types of spirits as well that are said to be there. So I recently got invited to go along with a Yorkshire paranormal group who have done a few bits of, collaborative work with recently. And I was going to update and do a video on it as well. So I'm walking down this long corridor. I went off on my own at this point to catch what I wanted to catch footage wise. I've just me putting things together to tell a story over, really, not to catch ghosts as such. But this corridor was as still as anything. There was no windows open. The doors were already open, completely still. As I'm walking down it, there's a big gush of cold air from behind me. So it made me spin round. And then there's heavy chandeliers going down the corridors. And this one heavy chandelier that was above my head is swinging back and forth like that. But every other one is completely still. And the air is still still. It was just this one sudden gush. And it must have been considerable to make that chandelier swing. So it's when you actually get something where you think, hang on a minute, that nothing really could have done that. That's easily explainable. And you know it because you're in the moment. Anyone else watching it can
Yeah.
say, oh, who knocked it, or there was a window, or blah, blah, blah. But you know it. Another great one that I always refer back to was the Old King's Head in Chester. Now, I sort of fell in love with the ghost stories of this from Most Haunted again, like, when Yvette was telling them.
I
And
haven't
for
watched it all. I feel like I should actually watch it. I've seen a couple of them, but I think whatever channels it used to be on, I didn't have at the time, so I've kind of missed out.
That's it, and they have, been apparently proved to be. I haven't seen the proof, but to be faking things later on. But at the same time, they've got to keep a TV show alive, I guess. But
Mhm.
I always loved his storytelling side of it and the history. It wasn't the paranormal investigating. And the owner who's on that episode with it is still the owner now, and he's now turned it into My Haunted Hotel. It's called, so it's a paranormal experience for the night, and the rooms have been created incredibly. To be honest, they look amazing, very atmospheric. So I got in contact with him and said, "Can I go and create a video for you?" And he facilitated all of it. It was just me and Craig up there, very eerie, and I don't get spooked easily. In fact, getting scared keeps me going. I'd say curiosity killed the cat in man form. Uh, And we're doing a one introduction in this bedroom that just had like flickering candle type lights on in there. So it already set the atmosphere. And on the side of the wall, there's a goat's skull that apparently they'd got from Scotland that was being performed in black magic rituals, so they say. So as I'm doing a bit of an introduction to the bedroom on the video, um, there's two loud thumps on the bedroom door, and it's only me and Craig up there. And interestingly, the corridor on the outside is that creaky because we've just been walking on it,
Mhm.
like very loud. It was complete silence, yet these two poof, poof, thuds on the door. So it made me jump out my skin. And naturally, again, through your brain that's rationalised it, I say to Craig, oh, it must be the owner messing about with us. You
Yeah.
know, because it was that obvious. Anyway, dead silence. I was actually a little bit reluctant to open the door, which isn't like me. But it really made me jump. So anyway, I think Craig opened the door first, and the corridor was completely dead silent. So I felt really apprehensive entering each room after that then. And interestingly, the hotel runs 24/7 security cameras. So at the end of it, he said, "Oh, how did you get on, lads?" And we said, "Oh, brilliant." But we told him about this experience we had. So he said, "What sort of time was that?" And I always remember we said it was about 11:14 because I looked at my phone. So we go into his little control room that he's got because they fully have a YouTube fledged channel as well now. And he pulled up that time. Now, from the room and the corridor, these two loud thumps are picked up, particularly from the corridor camera, and there is quite clearly nobody there. So that's a really good one that I can say did actually scare me, and I don't scare easily.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So where have you not been yet that you really want to go? Like what kind of areas and stories have you heard that you're like, I have to go and investigate?
Yes, totally. So there'll all be a little bit of a spooky wish list. I'd like to do the Necropolis in Glasgow. It's infamous for a vampire legend there. That does date back to like the 60s, and it's not like it's still seen as such. But again, I go to tell the stories, so
Mhm.
I want to do it from the actual settings rather than putting other people's footage over my voice. So that's one that I definitely want to go to. I'd love to do the Tower of London. I'm a bit of a history buff, so I know a fair bit about there and some sort of things of the old medieval tortures as well that
Yeah.
people in the modern day are experiencing. And unless they knew what they were talking about, they couldn't really have known that that was happening in there. So that
Mhm.
interests me. Um, and there's another area as well that's connected heavily with witchcraft up in Essex way. So I don't know how much you know about the sort of witch trials of England, but they got it quite heavily over there,
Mhm.
with quite a lot of people executed for that. And there's a set of woodlands around that area that apparently people still hear, like the screams coming from in the dead of night.
Screaming Woods.
Yeah,
I
it
have
could be.
been there at night.
Yeah, it could be that. Yeah.
Yeah. Pluckley.
Oh,
Is
Pluckley,
that
I
the
did.
one?
Yeah, I did Pluckley to
Oh, you've
Screaming
done
Wood.
Pluckley.
I
Also, there's
did.
another screaming forest.
I know. This was. It'd be in the summer we went there because I remember that the evening was beautiful. But that's another interesting thing. Speaking of catching stuff, is there's one of the. It's full of ghosts, isn't it? Pluckley. I think there's about 13
Yeah.
reports.
Yeah, we
Um,
found a map and it basically walked you to each. So I went on a hike with the girls and
oh,
it walked you
ah,
to each of the spooky spots.
I
And then
think,
we ended up in the forest at the end. But I've been again with some guys,
yeah.
and they were down for a convention or something, and I'd gone to meet them, and they were like, "Well, let's go there at night then," because they'd never heard of it, and I told them about it, and we went there at night. I think the only screaming that happened in the forest was me every time they made me jump. So I haunted the forest that
You
night.
do that on purpose, do you?
Yeah.
Oh, someone's got to, haven't they? But yeah, one of them's apparently a phantom horse and carriage, and people hear the of the horse's hooves going through.
And then there's the crossroads where it was the with the gibbet or something.
Yeah, it's the crossroads, the bit where the tree is, where apparently a highwayman was impaled on it.
Yeah.
There's something like that, and his ghost is still seen. And I feel like the most unsettling one I remember reading about from that village is the headmaster's ghost. He was the headmaster of the local school and had apparently hung himself from one of the trees, and
Oh,
his body was found by people going to school the following day. This
yeah.
is like, a Victorian era sort of death. And apparently his body's still seen swinging from a tree up there. And out of all of them, that one really unsettled me.
Hmm. So you were talking about then Essex. So was that around Colchester? Is it that
Yeah,
way?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because it was Matthew Hopkins, because I grew up in Norfolk, so obviously it's not too far from Essex, and I think he
Yeah.
found his way there too for the witches.
Oh, he did. He did some awful work, and it was on the back of the demonology book written by King James that was saying how to find and persecute a witch. And then, of course, Matthew Hopkins got the notoriety of continuing to do it and then being paid for it. So the villagers would hire him to come and do it. And if by the end of it he found nothing, well, he simply wouldn't get paid and his reputation would be,
Mhm.
you know, so, the trials were based upon, as you'll well know, complete fiction. A lot of them, they were accusing people of this ridiculous things of the crops dying to somebody in the village getting sick. It was really all kinds. And whilst, there might well be people out there that, do practice witchcraft, and I've certainly met a few of them firsthand that absolutely, fully believe in what they do, and I've got a very open mind to it. But a lot of the people from those times, 16th century sort of witch trials and what have you, I think were just the poorest people in society that were blamed and then cruelly sort of, tackled for it.
Yeah, yeah,
And
no.
that could explain why the ghosts are sticking around.
Yeah, I mean, if that happened to me, I would definitely be haunting people.
Oh yeah, he's so vengeful.
I'd be haunting his ancestors, but I don't know if he has any ancestors, but I'd haunt them if he did.
Surely will do, yeah. And a place that's notoriously known for, the haunting of, witches. Certainly they died for it in the dungeon. Is Lancaster Castle. So the Pendle witches were kept there
Mm.
in this terrible dungeon together. And one of the older members, one of the grandmothers that was said to have led, sorry, one of the clans there, Demdike, perished in the old
Mm.
cells down there before she could even take trial. And that dungeon you can't really see it to the public now, but one of the tour guides, again, I got chatting a bit about what I do and what have you, and he began telling me stories and stuff. And I said, have you ever seen her or heard her? And he said, no. He said, but I've heard her walking up the steps. I was like, oh, what do you mean? And he said, well, a couple of times when it's been the winter and it's dark early and I've been locking up, he said, I've heard footsteps of like clothed feet, so not like hard shoes,
Right.
like the cloth type feet
Mhm.
coming up the steps. And of course, I've gone to investigate it because he's locking up. And he said there is nobody there. So he said, I can vouch for that. There is phantom footsteps
Mhm.
there. And the conditions they were kept in there were just dreadful. So it's no wonder that she's probably sticking around.
Yeah, I had a photo shoot in, I think it was Bury, so it was not too far from Pendle. And I
Yeah,
had
yeah.
a hotel, so I was like, well, I like to make, if I'm traveling somewhere, I want to make the most of my time there. So I actually did the Witches Walk. So it's actually on the Ordnance Survey's 100 best walks or something to do. And it's the Pendle Witches Walk. So you go around the hill and it's basically where they walked the witches. But it was I'm sure it was a January. It was muddy. I was going through fields. Literally, my whole hiking boots were like immersed in the mud. And there was one kind of reservoir that you're meant to cross, and the bridge was closed. And I think they probably thought no one's going to be walking here at this time of year. But the map I had, I'm like, well, I can only go this way. Like, I don't know how to reroute myself. So I went along the side of the reservoir's wall. And there's all these kind of plants, and I was like, if I stand, I could literally go down. I don't know what's under here, but I managed to stay alive. I feel like the spirits of the witches might have kept me alive that day because I was like, if I actually got lost or stuck here, no one would find me because nobody was walking here because this is not the time of year to walk here. You could tell that I was definitely not a local. I probably wouldn't have been there if I
Yeah,
was.
the spot was a mile off. Did you manage to get in the Witch's Galore shop there?
I did. I actually bought my cauldron from there. My little cast iron cauldron comes
Oh,
from, I felt like I should buy my cauldron from Pendle. It would have
that's
more meaning. So, yeah, I did. I had to take my boots off to go in the shop because I was caked in mud.
Oh, it's like that in that area, it's Lancashire for you. That's another fabulously folklore haunted place. I write for Lancashire Magazine every month as well on haunted spots in Lancashire, and
Amazing.
it's one that I know a fair bit about as well. And it's got that old worldly charm, hasn't it? That I
Yeah.
love those stories to have.
I
I went
managed to go in the pub at the end for a glass of wine before I headed back to my hotel.
to the Pendle Inn.
Yes,
Yes, they do a
I feel
really.
like at the end of a hike, you're always meant to end up in a pub. It's the
Oh
rules.
yeah, no, it's the time to pay off what you've just done.
It is. You've been joined by one of the cats.
Oh, which is it? Can you see that side or that side?
I can see high up there, that side.
Oh, that's Pumpkin.
Do you know, I really want a ginger cat called Pumpkin. It's
Oh
one of
yeah,
my
I
future cat names.
can get Willow.
Pumpkin and Will. How did Will get the name? Oh,
It actually comes from Willem, which is a drag queen off RuPaul's Drag Race.
okay. One of
Yeah.
mine was in here, but they're kind of leaving me alone, which means they're going to be naughty all night.
They're always fussing rounds, yeah. They've got to
He
see
looks,
what's going on. And I bet he looks pretty,
he's quite ethereal because all I can see is kind of the light shining from behind him. I can see the kind of cat silhouette with this
of that.
light. Yeah.
Don't you?
Yeah. I've got, well, one black and then one black and white fluffy one, but they're brother and sister. And I wasn't
Oh,
even going to get them. My friend went to get kittens and I went with him to have a look. And then I ended up with two and he ended up with two. So we basically got all of them.
oh, I'll always have them. I absolutely love them. Yeah, I'm a
I've
big
always
animal.
had dogs. Like I had a cat when I was a kid, but then I've always had dogs in my grown-up life. And then I lost my dog at the end of lockdown, like my last one. And then I kind of had a few years of nothing. And I've moved to the northeast now, and it's
Yeah,
very cold. And I don't fancy going on dog walks when it's freezing. So we got cats
absolutely.
instead.
Yeah, cats are totally easy. I've got cats in here, and then I've got rescued loads of chickens in the garden, so got a little bit of best of both.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I've got two seagulls that live on the roof. I'm claiming them as my pets because they've lived here since I've lived here. So they're
Love
called
that.
Scampi and Chips, the seagulls.
Of course they are.
So tell me a bit more about the funeral business. So we said we're going to touch on this again. Um, what happens? How does it work? I guess like a lot of people don't know what happens.
Absolutely. So, in a sort of overall view, because so much goes into it that, people just wouldn't believe, but when a person will, on the day of funeral, I'll start off in that way and sort of work backwards, is because a lot of people think bodies are cremated together. They always say, am I just getting my loved one's ashes back? And does the coffin get reused? And absolutely not. No. So a deceased person stays in their coffin, they're cremated in it, and when you get ashes back, it's a combination of whatever's been left in the coffin, along with those and the body itself.
Mm.
Um, the cremator as well doesn't completely take a person to ash. You're sort of left with still quite large bone fragments and what have you. So that then goes in a grinder afterwards to put it to the powder that you'll then, collect from the funeral home then. Because naturally you wouldn't want to be getting bone fragments back. It's just not
No.
pleasant. Yeah, so moving backwards really then is how we look after a person all depends on really whether the family want to visit them or not. So, should I be doing an arrangement and the family express that yes, we want to see them, or for whatever reason, the funeral date's going to be in a few weeks' time, someone might be on holiday or
Mm.
a delay for a particular reason, I will recommend that the body's embalmed. So, what that basically is once you've passed away, of course, your blood has hardened, your organs have hardened, but your heart is still the sort of pumping around your body of how it once was. The veins still exist and what have you. So there's the embalming machine will act as sort of a imitation heart really, and it'll begin pumping the embalming fluid round like your blood would. It'll flush out all the bodily fluids and replace it with the embalming fluids instead. So a body that's passed away will generally be quite sunken because you dehydrate really fast. The eyes go the first. So the best way I can describe them to you is they go looking a little bit like cling film that's not filled anymore. They sink right down. So to combat that, we'll put plastic eye caps in so it gives your eye back the roundness again. Um, the mouth will sink in as well. That regardless of age, that'll generally happen. So as well as the suture being put in to keep it closed, which is like basically a stitch from the bottom of the jaw through to the nose. There's a mouth guard as well that'll fill your mouth back out
Who
again.
does that? Do you do that?
I have done it before, yeah. Yeah, I'll generally have a team that does it for me.
No.
But if I've got to do it, I'll be on call sometimes on one in every 4 weeks. And if I get to the chapel arrest and a person isn't looking the best, then I've got to do everything on my own to make sure they do.
I
So
don't
that
know
can,
who I would have thought did those things. Like, do you have to, I mean, do you have to have medical training to be able to, I don't know, or I don't
yeah,
know, kind of like taxidermy, but for humans.
yeah, totally. You kind of trained when you get to do it. It's all about making sure that person looks the best they possibly can when the family come to see them. And, that's using mortuary makeups as well. So, naturally over time, a person will darken, particularly the fingertips, the nails. So, we'll always tackle those as well, make sure they look as skin coloured as they can. And the particular makeup we have, it's like a foundation in palettes, like blocks, but
Mhm.
it's excellent for covering up marks like that, like no foundation you've used before. It's
Mhm.
for that particular purpose. So that keeps them looking as fresh as they possibly can in the meantime. But generally, with the embalming fluids, it'll retain that sort of colourless grey, sagged skin.
Mm.
It inflates it again and gives it a pinky hue. So it kind of looks as though I say to families that instead of that person looking as though they passed away, they'll look more as though they're asleep.
Right.
Um, and it slows down Mother Nature, and that's generally the nicest way I try to go about it.
Mm.
Every now and then you'll get somebody who does want to know the ins and outs, and in which case that's fine, I'll tell them. But most people generally want to know this, well, what is embalming, why am I being offered it, and what does it
Mhm.
entail? Which I'll tell them as much as they feel comfortable knowing, really. But I would usually, certainly recommend it for anyone that's lost someone and thinking, should I go and visit them in the chapel arrest?
Yeah.
Give a more pleasant experience.
Mhm. I think the only thing I knew about embalming before this was from the mummy, and that one doesn't sound fun, having your organs pulled out through your nostrils. So none of that
Oh,
happens, I'm guessing
like,
here.
that used to fascinate me as a kid. I used to love learning about that.
Yeah, I love the movies.
Oh, they're so good.
Yeah.
What do you think of the remake?
Yeah, well, what the Tom Cruise one?
Yeah,
Um, I don't know. I think I love the Brendan Fraser ones. I think the Tom Cruise one, it was just like a Tom Cruise action movie, wasn't it, with a mummy in it?
it
There's one of the buildings at the end where the she's got all the writing and stuff on her face. It's actually an old, I think it's an English heritage building that you can actually visit. And I went there on a hike with my friend. It was just like on our route somewhere in the south. So I don't know whether it was like Hampshire or somewhere that way. But that was another cool building. You can just go and wander around. It's old, I think it's an old, like not a monastery, something like that, though. you can go and have a look at, but also very cool vibes there.
Yeah, all places with a bit of history like that, we could walk it in 10 minutes to where we've got a church by us that's been here since the late 1300s.
Mm.
And it's one that was spared by Henry VIII because of its local, how it was doing locally when he did the Reformation, it was destroying the churches.
Yeah.
He did destroy the monastery though and took all the money from them and, it went back to the monarchy.
Mhm.
You can still, where the car park is at the back of the church now, it's still got the stone walls with stone archways in where it would have been the monks' beds where they would have slept. And that's just out in the open now. So it's just cool places to go and see. And people
Yeah.
walk past it every day and they just think it's a feature of the wall. And it's
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, there's so much history that you walk past all the time. I think, like, I mean, obviously we've got bits of Hadrian's Wall, like in Newcastle, in the city centre. There's like a blob of Hadrian's Wall that you just, if you're in Newcastle, you're going to walk past it all the time. But until you kind of delve into the history, you don't know.
It's fascinating, isn't it, that what's around us all the time? And
Mm.
that's why it's such fun telling the ghost stories as well, because it's places that people walk past every day and they've no idea the legends that were once
Yeah.
so popular.
So interesting. I think having spoken to you, I really want to kind of go and do more research of where I am because I've only lived up here for just under a year and I haven't really explored that side of things up here yet. So I've done like lots of the castles and lots of the hiking, but not the actual kind of stories.
I see. So as
Um,
part of setting up your podcast to touch on all areas of horror then, so of course the movie side of things, but also it's a big net, isn't it?
It is, but obviously it gives me more scope to talk to more people so I don't run out of people to speak to. But it's fun to like cover everything because I'm interested in all sorts of things. Like my love of horror was movies, but I've always been interested in the paranormal and haunted stuff. So I love kind of talking to people about that kind of stuff too. But I've got somebody who's got a chili sauce company next week. That's like horror based and so just anyone that's got anything to do with like the horror world because I feel like people who are into horror kind of have interest in all of these different things as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. As you say, it can branch off in all different directions, can't it?
Yeah, that's it. That's what I'm going for. So obviously when I found you, I was like, he'd be great. And I thought I'll take a chance. I'll drop him and I'll slide into his DMs and see if
Oh,
he responds.
get right in. Anything that's like that, like Halloween, I always say to people is my Christmas. So it always has been.
I have
Probably.
Halloween miss. So we
um,
have basically Christmas dinner, like so a roast dinner or I make a nut roast, and then I with pumpkin pie as a dessert, and then presents. But they've got
oh,
to be kind of slightly horror themed presents.
I love that.
Halloween miss, yeah, like it's another excuse to have, basically a celebration. But yeah, we do
Hey,
something
like,
special.
isn't it? Like it starts sort of end of September. My birthday's in October as well.
Is
So
it?
yeah, it's always like a bit of a season for me. And the day itself, I'll always make sure it's off work and I'm doing something
Yeah,
spooky for it. And the lead up, I go to a lot of the press nights for the horror attractions now.
yeah,
Within, reason of where I can travel to reasonably. But I just love them as well because some of them are so good these days. They're really
yeah.
amazing.
Have you been to Shocktoberfest, Tully's Farm?
No, but I've heard of it.
It's down in Crawley. It's incredible. That's the first one I ever went to, and I've been to a few since. And we've
Yeah.
got one up here called Psychopath that I haven't been to yet, but I want to give that a go this year.
I've heard of that as well. Yeah. One I've been to since I was younger, and it's fabulous to see how it's grew amazingly throughout the years. There's one called Farmageddon, and I think we first went there when we were year 10. I always remember being with a group of friends and some of them being too scared to go in, so I had to run back to the car where the dad was waiting. And
Oh,
it's been something we've done every year since. And
yeah.
what
I
I
think
love,
they're so much fun. It's like it's a very American thing, isn't it? But it's really taken off over here now. I love anything like that.
you've got a zombie paintball on the back of a tractor. I mean, who doesn't want to do that?
Yeah, I love the hayride where you're on the tractor and then you've
Oh
got the
my,
kind of
yeah, that's my
characters jumping on and trying to spook you. It's super fun. But my birthday is actually August, and all of the like the home sense Halloween stuff comes out just before my birthday. That was a cat trying to climb the curtain, in case you wondered, and then crash.
idea.
So I always get kind of like home sense Halloween stuff for my birthday presents. So I feel like that's it. My Halloween kind of begins in August then because I'm in the mood. Like, and obviously, like when summer's coming to an end, I'm like, okay, like I can't go to the beach now. So it's basically Halloween's on.
And the candles are so good in there, aren't they? The Halloween themed ones.
Yeah.
And this
Yeah.
black is
I
from Home Sense.
Yeah, I love it. Is your blanket from HomeSense? Actually, I've got a bat one here, but this one's not HomeSense. This is my bat blanket. This is like my pink goth blanket, but this one's I think that's Home Bargains actually. The cat claimed it though. She likes to make that her bed in the corner while I'm working.
I'll have to quickly show you another cat that I've got. I actually got her from a family I looked after a funeral for. She sat with a ghost cushion from Home Sense. See if you can see her.
I've got the thing telling me that we're running out of time. Let me cross that off the screen. Oh, she's got the ghost cushion. Oh,
Yeah,
look.
isn't she cute? She's
She's
well
so...
away.
So you've got three.
Yes, I've got three now, yeah.
Amazing. Well, we are running out of time. I feel like I could talk to you for ages because you've been
I know.
fascinating. And I love your backdrop as well. I said that at the beginning. I was like, I've just got this white wall, which I actually I'm picking up a grave in a couple of weeks. Somebody's making me a grave with my name on it, so that's going to go behind me. He'd actually made one for part of a film set that I'm in, and I saw it and I was like, I want one. So he's making me one. So I'm slowly but surely going to decorate my background.
Build it up with all quirky things like that. We've got a few in the house, actual coffin embellishments. Of course, not off any that anyone's ever been in, but
Yeah.
we have them all on
Oh,
supply. Got loads of them.
get down.
Is that the cat?
She's up the curtain.
Oh, I was going to say there's a shadow.
Yeah, no, she's right up the curtain. She hasn't done that for a while. That used to be her trick, and she kind of stopped,
Oh,
but I think she wants feeding. So that's probably my cue to to end this here and go off and feed her. Thank you so much for coming on the show. You've been great. And I'll have to bring you back. There was a tale. Did you see that? I'll have to bring you back at a later date when you've got more to tell me.
absolutely, yeah. Keep in touch. It's been fab talking to
Oh,
you.
hello. Oh,
Oh,
hello.
hello.
Oh, this is me. This is magic.
Oh, hi. Oh, she's fluffy. He or she?
This is the she. So
She.
she's in zoomies mode. I think that's about to begin, isn't it?
You can tell. They start going silly in the
Yeah.
face. Oh,
She's off.
as well.
She's off.